Welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. I'm Jess or Jashi Corinne.
And my name is Mark, and I go by Mark Your Pages, and welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Planner Pals podcast. Today, we're already starting to talk about next year. It's crazy that we're going to be talking about this topic today, but Jess and I, we're not choosing just yet because I don't think either of us are mentally prepared to try to make any of those decisions. But I thought today would be a really great time for us to start to think about it and getting you thinking about it, Planner Pals, as well as we get into it. And so what we're going to do today, and I think we did this last year too, I should have looked back before the episode, but just has this really great acronym, which is called WANT, which stands for wins, aversions, needs, and things to try. And we're going to be covering that today as we go through and just looking back on what has happened this year, as well as what we're looking forward to for 2026. Holy crap.
I know, right? It feels like unnaturally early to be thinking about this, but then I have to remember, like, the Hobonichi peeps already have their orders on the way, I'm pretty sure. Like, planners have been released. It's just that those of us who are using a blank notebook or a doc grid one or whatnot, we have a little bit more time, a little bit more lead up before we have to make some kind of like very hard formal decisions about things. But given that we are getting into new setup season, this is usually the time that I start thinking about those kind of things, which it still feels a little too early because so much can change in the next 2.5 months, like at the time we're filming this, 2.5 months. But in terms of want, it is something that I like to use before pretty much anything that I do journal related. So if it's a weekly setup, a monthly setup, a new planner lineup, like we're going to talk about today, as Mark told you, it is wins, aversions, needs, and things to try. So if we're thinking about the wins, this is very much what's working. What are we loving? What's going really well? Things that you find are very easy to keep up with. They're fulfilling the purpose that you gave for them in your journal or notebook or lineup or whatnot. When it comes to aversions, this is the opposite. The stuff that kind of sucks. It just isn't really doing what you need it to. Maybe you had really good intentions putting that into your journal, into your lineup, and it's just not really fulfilling the purpose you gave for it. Or it could be something that, you were kind of tentative about to start with, and now it's like 100% confirmed that you do not like it, you do not use it, and you do not want it anymore. By thinking about those kind of things, we can make more intentional choices moving forward. The next section, though, needs, this is very much about kind of like future casting. What do we kind of predict or like looking into the future? What is future you going to need from your lineup? Is it a new kind of life area that might pop up? Is it something that you need in terms of the materials or the supplies? It could be adding an additional planner to your lineup if you wanted to. And that can also kind of come into the to try section. This is where we get to, at least for me, get quite enthusiastic about the idea of newness because I love new shiny things, whether that be a new style of planning you're trying, a new type of journal you're trying. Maybe you want to go to a pre-printed kind of structure when you've been doing bullet journaling or something like that. Maybe you've been in a pre-printed structure and you want to have some more flexibility and you want to go with a bullet journal. So anything that you've seen online or been musing with that you might want to lean into a little more next time. So we're going to go through each of these sections. We're going to start at the start, a very good place to start. So Mark, from your current system, what are your wins from this year?
Absolutely. So I've been thinking about this for the past few days as we go and think through like what's been good. And I actually went ahead and just flipped through my journal and I was like, okay, what is working? What is not working this year? And I think what's really working well for me right now is that I feel really good about the general structure of my pages. My weekly spreads are doing exactly what they need to do. I have a section that has the overview for the entire week. That way I'm popping in any type of like high level meetings, appointments, things like that that have to be done on certain days. And then really leaving a lot of space for just notes and tasks and things that are going on. This has been kind of my go-to spread for a long time. I think for a while I was trying to move away from it because I wanted something different, but then I would always just come right back to it because it's what works for me. I've definitely love using, stationery inside of here. The stamps has been a really big thing for me this year. I've been using a lot more of, trying to include like more color, but honestly, why do I need to force that, right? If it happens, it happens, and that's about it. But I just love that the structure gives me the space that I need to do that, and I can adjust it how I want, but it's always an easy spread to go to and something that I can set up really, really quickly.
Yeah, I think that, we talked a little bit ago about like planner peace versus planner chaos. When you find a layout that does work for you, but you're the kind of a person who just enjoys newness, enjoys novelty, trying new things and such, but you still find yourself coming back time and time again to this like kind of base structure that just works. Like if you need something that works, that's your go-to. It is very nice to have found that. I found something kind of similar for my weekly structures, and in the month ahead, I'm thinking about how I can maybe do a couple of tests or trial runs of something a little different before we get into the new year. The last couple months of the year, always good for testing and trying things before you commit long term. So if you can find somebody who's got, if you're musing with a Hobonichi, I don't know why we always go with Hobonichi, we're like throwing them under the bus. I'm sorry, Hobonichi fandom, please do not come for us. But if you're thinking like, oh, maybe I want a Hobonichi for next year, I'm sure you could probably find somebody who's selling like a 2025 Hobonichi that you can use the last 2 months of just to test it out before you go and say, yeah, that's going to be my new system.
Let's be honest. There's probably people that have more than half of a Hobonichi because they really thought that they wanted to use it and got in. A friend of mine I work with was like that this year. She only made it like 2 months, and she's like, I couldn't use it anymore. Like, it just wasn't for me. But I feel like every planner person in the world is talking about using these planners, and I got it, and I really don't like it. So I agree with you. It's a really smart thing just to be like, yeah, I don't know if it's going to work or not. Can I get a used one, like a pretty well used one? Because, well, yeah, not everyone is using it all the way. And I mean, that's kind of the thing I've been thinking about too. I don't want to get too far ahead, but like the wins this year for me too, along with finding spreads that I like too. I was using a B5 this year. And it's a win from a standpoint that it works, but it's also something that where I'm like, but is it too much space? I mean, it's the constant battle that we go through, right? As we move up and down the size scale. It's like A5 is too small. I really love square notebooks, and I know that I really love square notebooks. And sometimes I'm like, well, let's try to switch it up and go B5. And I'm like, okay, this worked really well for me this week. Or the hard thing I have is when it goes to like 2 pages, like a full open spread, where it's like I didn't need all of that second page, but I needed a space for notes. And so it's like one side of my page has like everything in it that I need, all my notes, and then I use like maybe like, a few inches of the other side. I'm like, that's such a waste. Like, what else could I do with this? And I'm like, would this have looked different inside of an A5 or even a square and maybe worked a bit better? But like I said, I know that I like the bigger notebooks because I do tend to write a lot. So that is definitely a win from a standpoint of like having the space. The problem is also now that I'm looking at mine, like I know that I'll definitely get through. I don't think I'll use all of the notebooks book, but it's just one of those things where it's like it had plenty of pages to last me the entire year, and I think I'm okay with there being a lot of pages left over because I personally feel like I'm ready for something different.
Yeah, I can kind of imagine you either just like trying to go and find like a B 2.5, what, 5.25? Because yeah, B2, that would be massive. No, wait, that'd be tiny. No, wait, it'd be huge.
Yeah, really big.
Why do they do this? Why do they make it so like, anywho, B6, small, B5, bigger, B2, massive, right? You need a B5.25.
Yeah, I think that would be like the perfect, but that's a square essentially, right? Like that's a square notebook at the end of the day. It's like the height of an A5, the width of a B5. So I just need to stick with it, but I have far too many notebooks to say like I'm only using square notebooks moving forward.
No, I completely understand that because what I've found has worked really well for me currently has been a B6 size. I love the compactness of it. I think that it's just super, super cute. And it also means that I can fit 3 months in there really comfortably because something I've found has worked really well for me has been quarterly planning rather than doing like a journal per half year or a journal for the full year, is just having a notebook for a 3 month period of time. And that also leans in really nicely to other things that I'm doing, like my goal planning system and making sure that that's on a kind of 3 month or 90-day cycle. So I've really enjoyed that. But I also understand that I am the person who likes newness and I like to use a square or use an A5 or whatnot. But are those notebooks going to be too big to do quarterly planning in? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to see. Well, let's go ahead and move into our next section, which is aversion. So like we said, the wins are all about what's working well. Aversions are things that are not. I know I touched on it a little bit there, Jess, but let's go ahead and have you start this time. What aversions do you have that you're trying to stick away from as you think about next year's planning?
So my aversions were mainly thinking about journals in my lineup that just aren't getting enough use to warrant really being there anymore. One of those, sadly, has been my yearly collections journal. So essentially in my lineup for the start of this year and for previous years, I've had my everyday journal, which is the daily touch. That's where the daily task lists happen, all of that kind of thing. We have the yearly collections journal, though, which is where I'd put those kind of year-long trackers or logs or stuff, things that I wanted to keep track of over the entire of a year, but I didn't want to have to migrate from one notebook to another come the midpoint of the year, or nowadays, like, the end of a quarter. I just haven't been getting in to use that. And the only thing I have been using in that, I don't think I want to keep in a notebook anymore. That's mainly my analytics tracking. It's just way easier to do analytics tracking on a computer because, one, the analytics are on the computer, and two, the computer can do all the math for you. So rather than going and having to write out a bunch of different numbers and go and do all like the adding and subtracting and whatever else to find the differences, I'd much rather just put that in a digital system and have that spit the numbers out automatically rather than me having to go and do it myself. I've also found that my long-term collections journal, which was one that kind of like the yearly collections, it was for a longer period of time, but this was like beyond a year. This was kind of like for reference materials and stuff like that. Despite moving into a new long-term collections journal at the very end of 2024, I barely touched it in 2025. I've actually already like disassembled it, disestablished it, cut it up, like thrown pages away because I would rather just keep that stuff digitally. I'd rather have it in my second brain. So essentially, it's like taking my what was quite a large journal lineup and just slowly pruning it down and whittling it down to something a little bit more simplistic, hopefully.
I love this year, your evolution of even just this year. I feel like you have moved to a much more like digitally sound safe kind of space. It's like you have your analog planning and you love it for what it is. But this year, I know we've talked about it in previous episodes. You and I have talked about it on the side too. Is like utilizing the right tool for the thing you're trying to do. And I'm very much with you where I have, I try to do social media planning in my notebook and I don't do anything crazy with a lot of the analytics. It's mostly like wanting to see an upwards moving chart most of the time for whatever that is for followers or subscribers and whatnot. But I'm right there with you. I feel like it's so much easier to be able to look back. I can go into YouTube analytics and just look at a graph if I really want to, right? And I can go right along that line. It is nice to write it down, but it's like, do I need to dedicate a page for that necessarily? Especially if I'm getting to now and I haven't really used it in the past few months or kept up with it, because I'm just going on there to kind of look. But also I know a lot of planning you talked about this year you've been doing, especially for like videos and content and things like that. And I don't see it as a bad thing, throwing that out there. Like I just see it as like that maturity, that growth of as an individual as you move into like different phases of your life where you figure that you might need some different tools. I think in my brain right now I'm kind of going the same way, and I'll talk about that in my tries because I do think I want to try something different this year. But just wanted to throw that out there, that it's very interesting for me to watch and like hear you kind of go through this too, just because you have been that multi-stack planner for all of these years. It's kind of interesting and cool to see like what that morphs into. If you don't use it next year, like will you miss it, do you think? Or do you feel like you'll have it somewhere else where it's like, yeah, it just works better there?
I think that it's tricky because I do love the yearly collections journal for essentially a snapshot of me throughout the years and kind of, what was important to you. You've got your 52 and 52 or your 101 things list. You've got your, 25 things to do 25 times in 2025. And I love those kind of layouts, but I've just been finding that this year in particular, I have not been compelled to check back in with them. So in that case, what is the kind of purpose of putting in the effort to set up the layouts? Like, are we just doing it for a video? Are we performative journaling type of thing? And I don't ever want my system to become performative. So I think it's been kind of nice to take a step back and go through like what is actually working here. What are you using actively? What are you finding is fulfilling in the ways that you want it to be? And what can we let go of? And it seems that at this stage, the yearly collections journal is going to be one to let go of. That it does not mean that I'm going to either one, throw the notebook away because I'm not like that, not built like that, or two, don't give myself full permission to come back to it if I want to. I think it's really nice. And if you've been journaling for a while or planning for a while, even if it's not as extreme as like I scrapped my entire lineup and I'm going from like a 15 stack notebook to like one, no, we're not doing that. But just looking back through what was kind of working for you when you first started versus in the middle versus where you're at currently, even if your changes aren't quite as dramatic, you can see them. And I think that that's really cool to be able to look back on and reflect about like, hey, at this time in my life, this is what was working, this is what was needed. So there was a time in my life where having 10 or so notebooks in my lineup was necessary. Whereas now I'm probably leaning more towards like I mean, it's still probably kind of a lot for some people, but maybe like 6 notebooks? I haven't counted.
Yeah, as I took a look back on mine, I really have been spending a lot more time thinking about it because I think I am ready for a change. So, like the aversions, and this is probably one of the biggest things this year that's really kind of been getting on my nerves in the arsenal of notebooks is that as I've been writing with my fountain pens, the paper it's bleeding through now. Like it's not just like ghosting, like the ink is really bleeding through, and I don't know what it is. And I know we talked about it. I know Arch and Olive has like denied that the paper has changed, but like for the past several years that I've been using fountain pens and ink inside of my notebooks, I've never ever had a problem. But the notebook that I'm using this year, it's like almost every single page, and I'm kind of trying to ignore it. I'm just like, okay, Mark, well, you're using ink, so like that's going to happen. And I'm staying away from a lot of like the more dangerous inks that I know that I have that do that. Like I have some notorious inks that just can't be used in notebooks. I get that. It's like you don't use a Sharpie marker inside of a notebook. It's going to bleed no matter what. But it's just, I don't know, something about it right now is just really irking me. I don't know if I just need to like not write with as thick of pens like the mediums and the stub nibs and just go with like fine and extra fine. That's great and all, but like I want a little diversity in what I'm writing with. I don't want to have to worry about it as much. So like the bleed through is just something, and I've talked about that for years. It's always been something that's bothered me. And also I think just like finding the right spread. I mean, I know I just talked about like finding that perfect kind of layout. I know what I want it to do and it does it. It's not really a version from a standpoint. It's like almost like I don't feel that I have to experiment as much anymore, almost to the point you just made where I feel like if I'm doing that, it's almost more performative. I'm doing it because I want something crazy or kooky to like post online and say that I did that versus just finding a spread in something that just works for me. And as I've kind of come into liking the way that this looks, and here I am now thinking about going a completely different way, of course, because that's what I like to do, poke my brain every now and again and be like, nope, don't get comfortable, my friend, we're switching the sucker up. I just want to like find something that works, but really do think I'm kind of getting to this point where like I used to always just look at like how many notes and tasks I was writing in a day, and I think I'm kind of moving in this way right now just in my career where I have specific collection pages for those things. Or honestly, this year a lot of stuff has lived on Microsoft Loop or kind of like a Notion type deal. We've moved to using those tools and technologies more, and therefore I'm not writing as much of that in my notebook because it's all there and I look at it every day. So I'm kind of in this mode where like, do I just move into like an actual like rapid logging, daily logging versus having each section as I've had it in the past, like this is Monday, here's the space for Monday notes and tasks, here's Tuesday, and just leaving it open and just writing the dates and kind of going from there. So that's kind of like my versions of it gone through this year and look through it is like, I just don't know that I love that because I do feel that it's a bit wasteful, especially if I'm not using the pages. Honestly, I have some spreads where like I wasn't using as much of the pages as I wanted to. And I was just kind of thinking like, am I overdoing it now? Like I'm kind of on the other side of the hill where, was it 2 or 3 years ago? I think I went through maybe 3 A5 notebooks in 1 year. Like that's how much I was writing and going through. So I was like, okay, Mark, let's go towards the square and the B5s because it gives you more space. And now I feel like I'm on the other side of that now where like at this moment in time, so much of that writing is happening digitally. I'm only really writing down notes and tasks for myself now to remind me what I need to do versus those larger, broader notes that I used to do for my full team. So that's kind of where I'm at version wise is like finding the right paper now that does work with the fountain pens because I just got a whole other stack. I don't know if you can see it over here, but I have 2 more rows. Like they're not going anywhere. I just want to write with them more. So can I find something that's going to be able to handle that better? Maybe it's an older notebook. Maybe it is an older Arch or an Olive this year because I know that paper has just been better. Like, what's up with the new stuff? So that's kind of where I am.
No, that's very fair. I think that you touched on a lot of good areas for thinking about aversions as well. Like, we can think about it in terms of the structures, we can think about it in terms of the layouts, we can think about it in terms of the materials, or like the kind of practice around the use of your journal. For instance, if you find that there's like a tracker that you love the structure of, you love the look of it, you love the material you used, but you're not getting in and actually filling it in, then that's an aversion point. That's something that's not working. How can it be adjusted so that you do actually use it? I do feel like with the paper in particular, with the Archer and Olive, I completely understand where you're coming from there. I've been finding that since like 2023, I want to say like the 2023 sub box or something like that. Maybe it was 2024. je ne sais pas, but there was a box. And I do recall that my pen got a whole lot slippier and the dry time certainly increased. And I was thinking that that would be quite good for a fountain pen because people seem to like that kind of slippy paper for their fountain pens. But you're finding now that it's bleeding. We don't want that, or at least, some people do. We are not those people, not built like that.
Yeah, it's just something that's just happening more and more and more, and it's just really bothering me. And it's just something because that was the whole reason I moved away from like Leuchtturm notebooks and other planners and things like that, because it's like, yes, I can stamp on here, I can do whatever I want, I can use the pens that I want, and it's always going to be a fresh, crisp new page on the next page. But now it's like I'm flipping the page and I'm like, ew, like I didn't realize that ink was going through there. I wasn't doing anything crazy. I wasn't painting on my page with the ink. I was just writing with a fountain pen. Like that's it, So those are kind of my kind of two areas.
No, that's very fair. I think that being able to try and like trust your suppliers and use the ones that you actually want, the ones that spark joy, is definitely something that we should lean into. Of course, our next section is needs. I feel like you already have a need lined up then. So what are your needs for next year's planners?
Yeah, so I would say kind of my top three are going to be room for notes. Like I just talked about, I feel like the task and the notes are really important for my layouts. I need to have that overview, but I need to have the space for the notes, and I just need to be open. And I need something that makes it feel flexible so that if I'm not using entire pages like I was talking about before, like if I'm only writing a little bit on a B5 page, it doesn't feel like a loss. So it might be a size change just to see. I'm not quite sure yet, but that's kind of important for me. I definitely need paper that's going to let me write with whatever the hell I want to write with. I know that's probably a big ask. I know that it is. I know that fountain pens are not always everyone's favorites. I just can't move away from them because I have invested way too much money and time into them not to use them, and they make me happy, and that's all that really matters, right? And I definitely think having that kind of weekly overview, but like quick weekly overview and then getting right into that week is important. I do it in everything. I'm currently playing around with one of the Night Owl planners right now, and the pages are interesting because there's like a weekly overview page, which I really love, but then every page has a schedule on it, and then it feels like I'm duplicating. I'm like, well, I don't know if I love that necessarily, right? But like that, what's that big overview, and then getting into each of the days, regardless of what I need to do. I can look at that weekly, but then just write it down, or just look at it and not have to rewrite it down for the day. Like it's right there. So I think trying to find a planner or something, I don't know what it is just yet. I have to start kind of experimenting to see what that might be. That's going to give me what I'm looking for, just because I think right now that's like what I'm ready for. So I don't know what that looks like. Like I said, I have a few ideas that I want to share in the try section here, but for me, that's kind of my needs right now are really going to be in those areas.
I think that my needs mainly come from like, if we're thinking about like productivity system in general, because there are certain elements in my lineup that I'm kind of actively looking to move to a digital space. It's like, okay, well, what's left? What is it in particular that you need to be able to organize in your paper-based system to make your planner lineup? For me, it is mainly like everyday organization, so tasks, notes if I have them, but it's mainly tasks and to-dos. Things like, my meal plan, writing that down for myself, and those kind of bits. Also, things like goal planning and project planning, I just prefer to do that on paper. Like, I could set up a system. In fact, I do technically have a system that is digital to be able to tackle those, but that's not where my default is. It's like, if I'm thinking about the default place to put information, my default for goals and projects is paper. It's not digital. I appreciate the kind of freedom, I guess, that comes with planning on paper for those kind of things. So I'm going to be sticking those in a paper-based system. I'm going to have something in my lineup dedicated to those. And thinking about goals and projects, main ones are going to be around health, mental health and physical health. So the things that I can do to keep track of and work on those and continue to improve them. I haven't fully fleshed out what my goals are for quarter 1 for next year because we're barely into quarter 4 of this year. So it's like, are we talking about this too early? No, we have to start thinking early because otherwise things will sell out and then we'll be left high and dry with no planners. Sad face, no me gusta. But also needing to make sure that I have spaces to do memory keeping as well, because although I'm not like a hardcore journaler in terms of memory keeping or a scrapbook or anything like that, I do like to have mini snapshots of like slice of life in my journals. And that was something I feel like I started this year out doing it quite well. It wasn't like anything major. It was literally just I'd take a couple photos on my phone throughout the week or something and print them off on sticker paper and slap them into my journal. But now, looking back through those pages, it just makes me smile so much having them there. Just little bits and pieces. Like, I took a picture of some pickled onions I made because I hadn't made pickled onions before and I was proud of myself for trying something new. Like, the actual picture itself is kind of unattractive, but the memory tied to it, it just like sparks a little bit of joy. So, in thinking about planning out my lineup, I want to make sure that I also have room in there for those things. But I also feel like I need simplicity. And with my new desk setup in particular, I've really been enjoying not having too much clutter on it. If you could actually see my desk right now, you would question that statement because, ooh, girl needs to tidy up. But I have really appreciated just having fewer notebooks on my desk and knowing that they're all things that I actively need to be within my grasp. So, like, paring down, lessening the lineup. That is probably a good idea.
That's so interesting to think about. I've been in a kind of a similar mode right now. I was doing something the other day on my desk and I like moved one thing and then a bunch of stuff toppled over. And then I moved something else and then like something else did. And I was like, oh my gosh, Mark, like it's too much right now. Like you've got all this stuff on here. I have a whole section over on like the left side of my desk with like these little, I always forget how to pronounce it, but like Kitsa stickers or whatever they are. But they're like the little tabs that kind of exist in here. I have 10 inside of this little container over here and I don't grab for them, and I'm like, well then why are they here? Like it's in the same thing, but it's mostly just have to do with the amount of stuff on my desk, not necessarily planners. Like, do I need a whole section that's holding all of that stuff? I don't think that I do. And yes, I had to like significantly downgrade my space, and there's a lot less space now than it used to be before I moved to this office here. But it is kind of in my mind too, where I'm like, do I need as much of that out all at once, or do I need to get better about that simplicity of where it is? And especially too, if you're limited in space, and this isn't necessarily for us, but it just got me thinking about it, is that there is nothing worse. Oh, it irks me so much because I do it sometimes. I'm doing it right now because I have my bullet journal that I use all the time. I'm testing out this other planner currently. I have some other pens and the other notebook that I was preparing to talk about that I'm thinking about doing for next year. And I'm writing and my arms are touching like all of them and they're piling on top of each other. And I'm just like, I cannot right now. I can't do this anymore. And I just like put them in another ADHD pile to the side before we started recording because it was just getting in the way. And I was like, I can't live like this. And it's like a big problem that I have because I like to test and try other things. And the only way for me to be able to really like try it is to go all in. But when I have, the first 10 months of the year inside of a bullet journal, and I'm like, now I'm going to try a different planner for this week. Like I can't get rid of the other one. There's all my information. I'm not going to transfer it all here to try it. But also I don't need a B5 out and then this big thick like A5 one over here and then other stuff. It's just like kind of too much. So like, yeah, how do I slim it down? Why can't I be a minimalist? I love the look of it, but I can't do it.
No, I completely understand that. Like, in thinking about my desk setup, because I just did my little rearrange of my office as well, one of the items that I used to have on my desk were these kind of little plastic modular drawers or whatnot. They all kind of like stack together and such so that you can, chop and change which ones you use to make your own set of drawers that has all of the little bits and pieces. And they used to stay on my desk because I wanted those things to be easily within reach. I wanted to be able to grab my pens and whatnot whenever I needed them. But now I'm in a stage with my planning where I just don't need to have them as accessible. They don't need to be like, half a foot away for me to be able to like quickly grab those things. I'm like, half a foot. I don't work in feet. I'm like, that's like a 6-inch, right? A subway. Anyway. But because I don't need them in my direct line of sight or easily within grasp anymore, I could take them off my desk and really free up my desk space. And now, despite today's mess, despite the fact that it looks slightly trash right now, I've actually been a lot better at keeping my desk tidy because there's less on it. So the clutter is a lot more obvious. So that's been something very nice. I think in particular, as you were going through, I was just being like, you could apply the want analysis to this. Like, what are the wins? What are the aversions?
You're absolutely right. That's why I love this so much, is because it just is a really great way to kind of just like use it for every part of your life, just to kind of think about it. I mean, at the end of the year, when I'm migrating notebooks, I have something very similar that I use for that too, just to be like, what are we taking? What are we not taking with us? Right. It's something that it's just one of those things where like I love to have my stuff out to be able to see it, but I hate when it starts to pile up and like I'm not putting stuff away. And I know it's a me problem. Like I know I look at it and I literally like I should really put that away, and I don't. Like I have stamps over here that have been over here behind me for the past 3 weeks because I just don't want to open the box to put them in there because I still have to label them and like repackage them the right way. And I just not interested in doing that right now. So it sits, so it's like the same thing with my desk sometimes where I'm like, oh, I need to do this ink swatch or do a thing or blah, 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 where I'm testing something out. I'm like, now I have to keep these mild liners on my desk and the pen that I'm using and it needs its own space. All right. So clearly we have needs, that we are trying to go away. I feel like I like regress back to aversions for a second as part of the needs, but like I need to not have aversions to these things, right? Like that's definitely a big part. The last part we're talking about is the try. And I'm interested to hear from you on this one because we've kind of made our way down here, right? Where we're like, okay, what are we thinking? Anything different that might happen? So Jess, what are you thinking about in the try section? Things you're just excited to experiment with or see that might work out for you?
Yeah, I think that the biggest one is that idea of the pared down lineup or whatnot. So going from the small fleet of notebooks to a smaller fleet. Is an armada bigger than a fleet? Maybe it used to be an armada, now it's a fleet. I don't know. Not good with history or the terminology of those kind of things. But just being really intentional about it, though, I think, because at the start of this year, had my lineup 10 or so notebooks or whatnot. And I think that I wasn't necessarily intentional about just eliminating them. They just became obsolete, or they just became, relics of a time past. I just wasn't using them. But it wasn't an intentional active choice to stop using them. It was more so just I slipped into a habit of not using them. So I think it would be really nice to enter next year with a lineup that is a little bit more solid, a little bit more set, pared down. And I've made that choice actively rather than just letting things fall by the wayside. So that one in particular is a big one. I also want to continue my experimentation with quarterly planning, I'm pretty sure. So going from a system where I was doing, a new journal setup every 6 months. So we'd start for, January through to June. And then the next notebook would be for July through to December. I loved that system, used that system for a really long time, but now I think it would just be better, and it would just kind of better align with how I'm structuring the rest of my planning, like with cyclic planning and quarterly planning, to go to a quarterly setup system. I also have been enjoying experimenting with bringing intentional collections into there that are specifically targeted towards goals and projects, because while I do have a goal planner, and I do intend on keeping that because it isn't quite finished and there's enough pages in there to last at least another 2 quarters, so I'll probably keep using it. But I would like to continue setting up those very intentional spreads and layouts to help me work on my goals and projects actively, rather than just being like, oh, maybe I'll write something down on my task list for this day or this week related to my goals. Because if I don't have something in there that reminds me to do the thing, often the things don't get done. I want the things to get done. That's important. I'm also considering experimenting with some new sizes for things. So notably for quarterly planning, I've been using B6s because it's nice and compact and small and it fits the 3 months really, really nicely. But I also miss having room to play and having that kind of expanded amount of space, whether that be a square or an A5 or something. I'm just not too sure how I will go about doing quarterly planning in there, because in a 3 month system, you don't need 192 pages. So it's like, do I also jump back into the Archer and Olive archive and go with a 160 page notebook? Because if I'm going to use a Tifosi, theirs go up to like 250 pages. That's like way too many. So that doesn't seem suitable. But, in thinking about using things from my actual stash, it's mainly Tifosi and Archer and Olive. So the options there, like possibly a little limited, but I think it would be interesting to test out and try doing quarterly planning in something that is a little larger. Yeah.
I like that. That's pretty interesting. So my approach this year, I'm doing a few things. Here's what I want to try. I want to try to bring my entire life back into one space. So, way back when I used to put everything work and home in one notebook. And then I was getting to a point where I felt like it needed to be in separate spaces. So I moved to separate notebooks, and then eventually was like, well, I don't need a whole notebook for that. So in my personal life, I moved to just using mostly like the Ugmonk cards, the analog cards that we were talking about in previous episodes. And that's worked well for me for my space. But the problem is that I'm not always sitting in front of my computer here. Now, my work computer is all of 2 feet to the right of me, right? Like it's not that far away, but as I've said over and over again, like it has to be in front of my face for me to remember to do it. Like, I wrote down yesterday for the previous episodes podcast, like upload to, Spotify. I wasn't at that part of the desk. I was at my work desk, so it didn't get uploaded right away. But if I would have just put that in one spot, maybe I would have had a better chance of getting that done. So that's something that I want to try first, is putting everything into one space.
I'm very curious about this, like, the one space to rule them all kind of deal. Look at you nailing it down to one pen to rule it all, and now you're going to have one notebook. I assume might not even be a notebook. Very intrigued. But I do like that you're kind of powering down as well, and like, in a slightly different way. And I'm also doing that. I just haven't gotten to your level of extreme yet. I'd be very curious to experiment with a like one notebook system. I don't know how I'd do it. I feel like Rebel Brain would kick in, be like, you're not the manager, you're not the boss of me, you can't tell me to do this, I don't like it, but I am curious about it. In terms of like going from, having your home stuff outside of your planet into it, do you have any kind of considerations or concerns around that? Because I know some people, they have to, or like they feel compelled to split it out because of like OIAing and stuff like that. Do you have anything related to that, or?
No, because I think most of the stuff that I'd be writing down inside of the journal anyway is not anything crazy. It's like, call the dog groomer, make a doctor's appointment. Like, why do I need to put that in a different spot? Like, I know that I need to do it. So just like put it where I'm looking all of the time. So there's not really anything major. And then from like a homes collection standpoint, like I thought that I was going to do that, but I'm really not. So like the social media stuff and everything that goes on with that, like most of that is in a digital space now where I'm organizing it and kind of putting it. I still write things down. Don't get me wrong. There still will be notes around and whatever else looks like that. But it's just something right now that like I just don't feel that it's really necessary. I'm not limited to space to where I feel like I need to have it in 2 separate spots. And honestly, I don't feel like it's really enough to really quantify having it in 2 spaces. That's kind of like where I am like mentally right now.
Yeah, no, I think that that's very fair, because in thinking about like, if I was to experiment with the same thing and go to an all-in-one, if I'm still sticking with quarterly, that'd be a great way to fill up that 192-page A5 kind of thing. If I'm sticking with the B6, there's no way that I could bring everything over, especially because in that I like to use my notebooks for that little bit of memory keeping and whatnot. One part of that is like my reading journal, or what's really a media journal, or a space where I can, jot down notes and thoughts and feelings about the media I'm consuming and whatnot. I appreciate having that in its own separate journal, because then it feels like its own little kind of creative aside. Whereas if I was to bring that into my everyday journal, it would be kind of interesting to see how I would go about structuring that, because I'd probably start getting just like a little bit persnickety about having it be very sequential, because my everyday journal is so sequential. Like in doing daily logs, it's like, here's the Monday, then it's the Tuesday, then it's, so on and so forth. Whereas with my reading journal, I'm kind of just like, hey, here's a space where something fits. Nothing's really chronologically recorded. Not to the extent where I'm recording notes for, Stranger Things season 4 before Stranger Things season 5. Wait, other way around. Season 4 and season 3. She can't math today either. It's cool. You guys get it. But I don't necessarily get quite as anal about having things in the order that I consume them in there. Whereas if I was putting that in my everyday journal, I definitely would. I don't think you're going to have that kind of problem. But what are you thinking about using?
So this is what I've been thinking about, Jess, because I've never really done it before. So Ugmonk has a disc-bound notebook, right? That is pretty damn cool. I've had it for a while, and I've been kind of thinking about it. And this is the main reason I've been thinking about it, is that when I write on my analog cards, and now don't get me wrong, this card stock is much thicker than the paper. And the paper in here is a 70-pound paper. I forget what the cards are, but like I can write with my fountain pen and not have any issues on these. Even like today, like well, it's different people, but like my notes for today on the back of here, you don't see any of the ink that's on the back of, well, you see the other ink, but like that's a very inky pen that I'm running with, and it's been doing just fine. And I was like, you know what, I've never fully given Disbound a full try, because anytime that I have done that before has been on a pre-made planner. So it's like, I forget the one that like Office Depot, Office Max has, they had like a brand, and some other ones too, and like there's always predated pages, and the paper in there was always atrocious. It was never nice. And what I love about Ugmonk is that I feel like he is thinking about that, because here's kind of the deal. Jeff uses his products as he should. He's doing a lot of sketching, note taking, drawing. Things are happening, and the paper's holding out just fine. Now, I've done a full out test with this paper just yet. Like, that's upcoming. So if you follow my YouTube, that's on its way as I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. The other thing, though, and the reason I usually stayed away from them too, is because I'm a lefty and like the discs were never very kind to me. So I'm also thinking about just turning my notebook just on its top, and then just using this, because it's dot grid paper that's inside of here. So like I could still do like a weekly here, and then I could do my notes on this side, and I think that it could work out for me. It's an A5 size. I feel like because it's disc bound also, it's easy to like flip up and do, or I can just pop the pages out, right? Like that's the great thing about the disc bound. Use it if I want to. I don't think that I'm going to need to do that, but if I want to, I can. I guess that's kind of my thing. I'm a little iffy on the size, because I do tend to like a larger notebook. They do sell a larger one, but it's like goes from like A5 to like letter size, like a regular size, which is a giant jump that I'm not quite mentally prepared for just yet. The other cool thing too is that they do sell their cards that have like the punches in the top that work with this Disbound system. So I was kind of thinking, like, what if I like clip those into here as well for the test? I don't know. I just think like I might just try Ugmonk as a whole. It'll be a great experiment, but it's it's papers in here. It's Disbound. I can take it in and out, and we'll see what might happen there. I'm iffy about if I want to also use the capture system or the analog system kind of with all of this stuff just yet, but like, what if I go all in and it works really well? I'm not saying I'm moving away from bullet journaling. Like, I still want to be able to use the main features of the bullet journal method here, but what if it looks a little bit different? And that's kind of what I'm thinking about trying. I feel like I have to give it time and experiment with it first to see if I like it before I go all in, because I do have 100 notebooks over here that are also needed me as well, and I need them. So I'm just thinking about maybe going into this year. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Any thoughts on that, Jess, as a person who's been doing it for a long time? Like, and you know me very well too. Like, do we think that I'm going to stick with this?
I'm certainly curious to see if you do. It sounds like a lot of change at once. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because sometimes that's honestly what we need. But have you kind of like, in thinking about the idea that the last couple months of the year are a really good opportunity for experimentation? And I know you said you were experimenting with Owl Planner, Owl Paper?
Mm-hmm.
Owl Paper
Yep.
Planner?
Yep. There you go.
Ooh. I know you said you were experimenting with them. Was it just this week, or like for a couple weeks, or?
My plan was just for this week, because I want to get a feel for the paper and kind of the general layout, because it's the pages are all exactly the same. Like every week has the same kind of layout to it. So I feel like if I give it a week, I'll have a pretty good idea. I'm trying different pens and highlighters and writing it and seeing all of that. So, and because it's undated but pre-printed, it's exactly the same every week. So I kind of know. Whereas, yeah, this is blank. This is really just like, could this work? Like, I could certainly see before I make a full year's commitment to it.
Yeah, definitely. Because like, if it is a blank kind of system, you could do that kind of experimentation up front to see if it's something that you aren't vehemently against or something from the get-go, because there's nothing worse than setting up a new planner or layout or whatever and being like, yep, this is going to be the one that changes everything for me, this is going to work great, and then you get into like 2 days into using it, you're like, ooh, I made a huge mistake, this sucks.
Yeah.
So being able to do that kind of like what I like to call an ooch, or like a test run for it, is usually a good idea. But I like the idea of going to a disc bound system that, like, you're not necessarily using it the traditional horizontal kind of way. You're doing that kind of rotated version so that you can flip it up, especially as a lefty and with things getting in the way. Because even as like a right-handed person, as soon as I try and use the left-hand page, I'm just like, cool, you're in the way, please leave. Being able to remove the pages, though, definitely does help for that.
Yeah, and what's also cool about it is that there's a part of their analog system. They actually have the analog cards that are all, you can also use the same discs, which are also very nice, and they're metal and they're not plastic and they look very nice. But it uses like three of them. And so what I was thinking about essentially is, using those in here. So I could have my tasks on the same page as I go through, and they just kind of fit right into the notebook too. So I think the versatility is nice. And if I want, again, totally up to me, I can take that out, have it up in front of me, as I know works well for me if I needed to like remember the task and things that I have going on. But then, where my brain starts to go is then like, does that bulk up part of that part, like the pages of your notebook? So like, is that a weekly thing that I'm doing? Then I have like an archive system. It all works together. I have all the pieces to it to like make it a full life, but at the same time, I'm like, but am I going to do that? And the thing that's holding me back mostly is I was thinking about how often do I really go back to look at previous week's notes and tasks inside of my notebooks. I don't, because I migrate them forward, and anything I need to keep, I keep in a collection page. So even if I take that, to-do list for the week and archive it inside of my archive box, it doesn't matter because I would have already migrated the tasks that were on that previous to this current week. So it's almost like using the ability to like pop it in here for the week, and then it goes inside of an archive box. Like, these are the kind of things I'm thinking through. Like, it's very new, but I feel like I could make it work. And like I said, I have all the things. It would just be me saying, do it and like make it happen.
I do also like the idea that, you kind of mentioned there that you don't go back and look at previous weeks or, previous entries or whatnot. And one of the things that has been like a difficulty with me and disc-bound systems is when it starts to get too full and it's really hard to flip the pages, essentially. She does not have that much experience, so like, it might just be me as like a novice or whatnot. But I think that being able to take pages out and maybe like archive or store them somewhere else so that they don't kind of bulk up your everyday carry is also a possibility with that, which is kind of cool, especially if you're going with paper that is a little thicker and, that takes up a little bit more space. I mean, like, it's this big versus this big. It does actually add up over time, though. So being able to, get to the end of the month and be like, cool, all of my January pages, I'm actually done with them. I can like take them out of my system, put them somewhere else so that then I'm not lugging around a whole bunch of paper. I mean, I know that you don't leave the house that often, but I'm thinking about people who actually like take their journal places with them. You're not lugging it around with you. You're making your system a little bit lighter, streamlined, more easy to transport, which is kind of nice as well. I'm very curious to see how you go with it.
Yeah, I think I can make it work. I think that's like in my mind, I know that I can do that. And I know that there's a lot of like the extra accessories and fun stuff. And I think that's also what gets me excited about it too, is that like I can buy the whole punch that Ugmonk has so that it works with the rings and the notebook so that I could also add other things in here. My brain starts to go down this way of like, oh, well, then I have to have a different journal for the archive stuff. But then I'm like, maybe not, like maybe I do keep it for the year. But like I said, I don't tend to go back to them. But then again, same thing. I have every single journal since the very first one that I started, predated, unplanned. If I used it for any stretch of time, I have it. So then I'm like, well, then what do I do with all of those pages? Like, I like to have the record of them to look back on, because I will look back on them from like a nostalgic sake, not for any information because it moves along. So that is something I have to consider. I don't want to have to buy like a whole other way to store and archive the notebook itself if I don't need to. So I think that will be a really big part of the experimentation too, to see like what that looks like, because it can only hold so many pages. And part of me really likes that because, like I said, I'd have to be specific about making sure the notes made it to collection pages and things like that. But at the same time, it terrifies me because I'm so used to having, 192 plus pages to write stuff in and not ever having to worry about it. So I feel like this is the direction that I'm going. But how about yourself? Just like, do you have a good inclination of like the direction you think you're going?
So I think that decisions that I've probably like soft made, I reserve the right to change my mind because she definitely will. But the lineup that I'm planning for 2026 is going to be an everyday journal, whether it's a B6 or something a little bigger. I'm not too sure. I need to do some kind of planning around that to see how I could actually make it work. I might do bigger than a B6 though. We'll see. I'm gonna keep the goals planner slash goals journal because that one has been working really well. I think I'm gonna keep it in the same notebook because there is enough space in there that I could finish probably the majority of next year. But I do kind of also want that to be in a square. It's currently in an A5 because of the structures I like to use in there. I think a square would be really nice. So maybe we'll see. It'll probably still stay the same though. I'm gonna keep the 5 year journal because I'll be into my fourth year of the 5 year journal.
Wow, look at you keeping that up.
I know. I think that there was definitely some of the sunk cost fallacy that went into that. It's like you spent such a long time setting this thing up, so you dang well better use it. So that one is gonna stay as part of the lineup. I think I'm retiring my R&D journals though, or like I'm not going to get rid of them or anything, but I just
Sure.
don't really consider them to be an active part of my lineup anymore because I'm not actively using them. What I am using instead is of course my scribble books. I love scribble books. They're great, they're messy, they are very disposable. I don't go back and look at a lot of the notes that I take in those, so probably keep up with those, but the R&D notebooks are probably going to let go of. And I'll probably, for the sake of memory keeping, have a reading journal. It'll probably be an A5 because that's what I like, and it'll probably be something very decorative and intricate on the cover because I think that that's beautiful for a reading journal. I don't want to say that that's it. Is that the lineup? Every day goals, 5 year scribble book barely counts because it's like a mess. Reading journal,
Yeah.
just five.
Yeah, that's great. You look at you. You're growing up. Like you're figuring stuff out. Or like I said, like you are. It's just like, but right now maybe that's not what you need, you know? And that's what I think I love about making these decisions. And they can change anywhere. No one's going to come. The journal police are not going to come and arrest you if you change your mind, because I'd be doing a life sentence if they were coming after us for stuff like that, right? But like if you get to a few months down the road and you're like, you know what, I'm really missing this, but you just introduce it into your thing. Like same thing. Like if I end up going this route, right? And after a few months, like I'm just not really loving it, I have a ton of notebooks I will pick up and just start a new journal in, right? Like I know how to do it. I've been doing it for over 8 years now. Like it takes me 5 minutes to set up a journal, right? Like basics, right? But like that's all I'll need to do. And I think that I'm totally okay with that. And it's just funny because I'm like looking back, thinking about like Mark a few years ago, which was like we were all sweating it right now. We were already planning, we had the videos, we knew what we were doing. It's like a big moment for us and for the planner community as a whole to see what other people are doing too. And so I'm kind of just like, yeah, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Like, it's cool. And I feel really good about that. You know, like I don't feel stressed out about not having what I exactly need for it or anything else like that. And like I said, I think I'm also just excited for the opportunity of like what more could potentially be done with it. I don't know, but we're here to find out. So 5 sounds like a really great number for you, Jess. That's amazing. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. It's okay. I definitely forgot some because we have the health journal and the swatch book as well. So let's make it 7.
See, I don't count those ones as a part of it. Like the Swatch Journal is just a Swatch Journal. It is what it's a resource book more than like a daily kind of thing. That's how I look at those.
No, that's definitely why I forgot to include it because I think that the health journal is kind of going in a similar kind of direction because a lot of the information in there was reference materials and that stuff I now want to store in like my personal knowledge management system or my second brain. That one is probably going to get adjusted a little bit. I probably won't need to. I mean, it's sitting on my desk right now so that I remember to fill in my exercise tracker because we're like 142 days strong or something like that at this stage. Woot woot. Yeah, tiny flag. Thank you so much. But I do think that that one possibly will retire at the end of the year because I will move stuff either into the second brain or into my everyday journal and such as I try and like streamline. The swatch book, yeah, it's a swatch book. I don't think it necessarily counts as part of the lineup, so I think that calling it 5, that feels like an accomplishment.
That sounds good. Well, I like where we're going with this. It'll be interesting as we like finally talk about what we're deciding on. We'll have to hit on this in a future episode. I know we have one plan that like actually talk about what we're doing for the new year. But in the meantime, Planner Pals, we're interested to hear from you as well. What are you potentially thinking about for your next journal? If you want to use the want analysis to fill that out, please leave a comment. Let us know what's working, what's not working, and what you're interested in trying. You can do this in a few different ways. You can always leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're watching on Spotify, leave a comment. We love to see them there. You can also hit us up over on Instagram at Planner Pals Podcast. And we've got the email open too. We have some hardcore email lovers, and I love you for it. plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to hear about what other people are thinking, mainly because I like to snoop through your comments and change all of my decisions because I'm like, ooh, that's a great idea. I should do that. So very much looking forward to reading what you guys have to say. And as always, thanks for watching.